all day long.
It's like he bit into a rare bratwurst. Jones on a weird snap, broken play, and he goes down.
Let's play a little game here, shall we? After this play, the Colts are faced with 3rd and long. They're in scoring position. Time doesn't seem to be an issue for them, as it's more likely than not that the Colts will score on this drive. And obviously, the Colts will hurry up to the line here so they can get as many plays off as possible if they convert this for some reason. You're up by 3. The Colts are more likely than not going to get 3 points here. You want to have as much time as possible to score and win the game in regulation. Not just because you don't want to play for overtime, but also because you don't want Jonathan Taylor to touch the ball ever again because he's that good. So what do you think Raheem Morris decides to do here? What do you think the Falcons decide to do here with the clock situation being the way that it is?
Taylor and just pulled it down himself, but there was nowhere to go. Wow, another big 3rd down situation off the sack.
A 54-yard field goal from here. They'll try to make it a little easier. It's Pittman inside the 30.
Yep, they let all that time run off the clock. And now, the Colts are going to tie it up with a chip shot field goal, and the Falcons have no time left to do anything of note, because of course they don't. Absolutely genius move on the part of Raheem Morris. Absolutely genius. And this is dumb either way, but if you're wondering whether or not it mattered in the end...
Right back to Taylor with Warren blocking. Touchdown, Taylor!
Oh yeah, it mattered. You knew it was coming. Welcome to Dumb Decisions. Before I break down what happened here, this whole series is about taking an in-depth look at decisions made during games that were clearly awful from the start. This isn't something look bad in hindsight. Rather, this is something look awful almost immediately. These are moves where your gut instinct tells you right away that there is no way this can possibly work. And sure enough, your gut instinct was smarter than that of an NFL head coach. And for this one, we're taking a look at the mind of Atlanta Falcons head coach, Raheem Morris. Remember when the Falcons looked like they could be something good this season? Remember when they were 3-2 after beating the Buffalo Bills on Monday Night Football and things were looking up? Yeah, so much for that. So much for freaking that. The Falcons have quickly become a team that is going absolutely nowhere, has a shaky quarterback situation, a shaky asset situation, considering their lack of a first-round pick in 2026, and a shaky coaching situation, because Raheem Morris has squandered his 2nd and final chance at being a head coach in the NFL. If the Falcons had a halfway competent coach, they beat the Colts. Plain and simple, they beat the Colts in Germany, and they enjoy the long flight back home with the flight not feeling like a 20-hour marathon and pain in the butt. Instead, their season is over, and it's partly because of crap like whatever the heck Raheem Morris just did here. So with that being said, let's take a look at why not calling a timeout with 1:03 left on 3rd and 16, thereby stopping the clock, is a really bad idea. There are 3 scenarios that happen here if you call a timeout, and as you'll soon discover, all 3 of them work tremendously in your favor, which makes this decision by this man right here all the more asinine. And before talking about those scenarios, I should note the timeout situation for the Colts, and that is the fact that they have none remaining. This means 2 things. Number 1, if you get a stop, the game is over, as you can just take a knee and they cannot get the ball back by stopping the clock themselves. Number 2, if you allow a field goal to tie it up, you don't have to give the ball back to the Colts. If you decide to push the ball down the field and it doesn't work out, you can just run out the clock and take it into overtime. So the ball is in your hands because the Colts have none of their opportunities left to stop the clock. And with that in mind, let's look at scenario 1, which is the scenario where you force the Colts off the field, the Colts do not score, and get the ball back up 25-22. In option 1, where you call the timeout with 1:03 left, you just won the game because they cannot stop the clock. In option 2, where you don't call the timeout, you also just won the game because they cannot stop the clock. Either way, you win the game. So this scenario should not be taken into account in any way whatsoever. So let's just go to scenario 2, which is the scenario where the Colts do not get a first down and it brings up a 4th down situation. In option 1, where you call the timeout with 1:03 left, you get the stop, bring up 4th down, and then, depending on how the clock is running, you burn your 2nd timeout with 58 seconds left, assuming the 3rd down play takes 5 seconds and stays in bounds, just for the sake of this argument. Now, if the kick is good, you're going to have plenty of time to move the ball down the field and win the game in regulation. You get it back with roughly 50 seconds left, and if you can get it to the 40-yard line of the Colts, you give yourself a realistic shot at winning it, meaning that you'll need to go about 30 yards in 50 seconds with at least one timeout at your disposal to win the game. That is more than doable. Football is a game of possessions, and if you have a chance to get an extra possession in a spot like this, more often than not, you should take it. And that's especially true when you realize that, like I said earlier, if you don't do anything on 1st or 2nd down, and Penix gets sacked, or a holding penalty pushes you backward, or anything along those lines, you do not have to try to score. You can just run out the clock and play for overtime, since the Colts do not have any timeouts. Either way, you ensure the fact that you touch the ball last. If the field goal is no good, you win. And if the field goal is good, you can go down the field with no risk whatsoever, barring a turnover. However, let's say you don't call a timeout and you allow the clock to run. Now at this point, you have 2 options, with one being to take a timeout and the other being to not take a timeout. If you take the timeout and let the Colts line up for the field goal, congratulations. When you get it back, you have 40 fewer seconds to work with. You just lost a solid 7 possible plays to push the ball down the field and win it in regulation. You've got little time to work with and need at least one chunk play just to have a chance to win it. If you don't take the timeout and the Colts have to rush the field goal, congratulations. You don't even get the ball back in regulation, and you can't even force a fire drill field goal scenario. When the sack happens, there's 1:03 left. Obviously, the Colts are not taking 40 seconds off the play clock to call the next play. You have to know that they'll get the ensuing snap off with no less than 10 or 15 seconds left on the play clock. Getting the field goal out there in 25 seconds or thereabout is not a fire drill situation. I understand the logic in not calling a timeout here if, let's say, there's 40 seconds left on the clock. In that spot, I get the idea of saying, if we can force the Colts to stay in bounds, they'll only have 12 seconds to rush the field goal unit out there, and we can really force them into a fire drill and a hard field goal. But here, this is as routine as it gets, especially because the distance isn't anything challenging. By not taking a timeout, you either leave yourself with little time left if the clock stops on 3rd down, or you burn a timeout afterwards, or you leave yourself with no time left if it doesn't stop. You allow the Colts to try a field goal that is not only pretty routine and makeable, but is also not pressed for time in the slightest bit. So in the 2 scenarios reviewed thus far, which are the scenario where you get a stop on 3rd and 4th down, and the scenario where you get a stop on 3rd down and allow the field goal, one of them makes no difference in terms of calling a timeout, and the other makes a massive difference in favor of calling the timeout. What about the 3rd scenario? What about the scenario where the Colts convert on 3rd and 16? Heck, they sort of converted earlier in the drive on 3rd and 21 when they turned a 3rd and insanely long situation into 4th and short and kept the drive alive. What if they did it again? Well, it still seems to weigh in favor of taking the timeout here. Option 1, you take the timeout at 1:03 and the Colts get the 1st down with about 58 seconds left. There is a finite ending to the drive. The end zone is only 20 yards away. They'll have more than enough time to call the requisite number of plays to get into the end zone if they want to win it in regulation. Compare that to option 2, where you don't take the timeout, and guess what? The Colts will still have a pretty similar number of plays to win the game in regulation. Like I said earlier, the Colts are going to get the ensuing snap off with no less than 10 or 15 seconds left on the play clock. So they'll snap the ball with about 35 to 38 seconds left. Get the 1st, and the Colts will still have a pretty significant amount of time left to get into the end zone and call enough plays. Depending on whether or not the third down conversion is in bounds, they might even have the same number of plays that they would have had before. Maybe there's a 1-play difference. Maybe they'll only be able to get 5 plays off instead of 6. But still, is that enough of a difference to warrant not calling a timeout? Especially considering how unlikely that scenario was in the first place to have happened? And again, if the Colts were at their own 25-yard line, I completely get not calling the timeout. But with the finite ending to the drive and the number of plays not really mattering at that point, it just doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't. So let's review. If you call the timeout, one of 3 things can happen. You either get the ball back and win the game 25-22. You get the ball back with plenty of time to push it down the field and get a field goal or a touchdown needed to win it, or the Colts are able to run their offense relatively normally should they get the third down conversion, needing a ton of yards, since obviously 3rd and 16 is pretty hard to convert. If you don't call a timeout, one of 3 things can happen. You either get the ball back and win the game 25-22, you get the ball back with no time left to push it down the field and get a field goal or the touchdown needed to win it, or the Colts are able to run their offense relatively normally should they get the third down conversion, needing a ton of yards. In other words, one of 3 things can happen either way, and 2 of them are practically identical. They cancel each other out. So if they cancel each other out, wouldn't you rather have a scenario that benefits you the most? If I say that behind door A is a toothbrush, $100,000, and a phone charger, and behind door B is a toothbrush, $10, and a phone charger, you take door A every time. And yet, in this instance, this man right here, Raheem Morris, did not do that. He did not evaluate the situation at all. He needed to be right on the timeout the moment the sack happened. The Colts were already in extremely makeable field goal range. The Colts had a finite ending to the drive, and the Colts were never in danger of needing a fire drill field goal that could rush the operation and throw things off. With that in mind, there was no reason, none whatsoever, to not take the timeout right away. You just screwed yourself over, and now you screwed your season over. For some reason, no one asked Morris after the game about this. They asked about his clock management at the end of the first half, which at least I sort of understood, even if I didn't agree with it all the way. But this was egregious. This was the one they should have been hammering him on, because there is no defending this. The Falcons might win this game if Morris is a halfway decent coach. But apparently, some guys aren't any better the second time around, and Morris seems to be one of those guys. So what did we learn from all of this? If you can call a timeout and it literally does not hurt you in the slightest bit, then call a timeout. Just because you have the lead at a particular moment late in the game does not mean you should just let the clock run out. There are times where it's necessary to preserve time, and this was one of those times. If the other team is not pressed for time, they have a finite ending to the drive, and they're already in scoring position to the point where time is not an issue for them, then you need to recognize that and find a way to work the clock to your advantage. And if you can't recognize the clock situations as they arise, especially when you're in your second stint as a head coach, then maybe you're just not cut out for this. Because when all these elements are in play, you can't exactly be surprised when this play backfires. Talk about a dumb decision. Check out our live streaming schedule for the next few days. We're live every single day on this channel, whether we're covering a sporting event or playing GeoGuessr or just taking your requests. So make sure you like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single time that we go live and so that you can join this community. Also, thanks to all our members and our Patreon supporters who get exclusive perks like their name of the end of each video, members-only Q&A streams, and cool emojis to use on videos and during streams. See how you can join this community and become a member or a Patreon member by clicking the link in the description below.